Recently, there's been a lot of talk about the Lineal title and whether this holds any legitimacy. I'm first going to quote the words of Tyson Fury and also something that AJ said afterwards. So firstly, Tyson Fury said this: "I'm not really interested in the alphabet titles of today because there are so many, and I mean no disrespect to anybody. The belt I have is the only real championship that matters. I'm only the man who beat the man going back hundreds of years, and I've still got it." When AJ was asked a question about the Lineal title, this is what AJ said: "When I was joining the heavyweight ranks, nobody told me about Lineal champion. I knew about the WBC, IBO, IBF, WBA and WBO, and I've got my hands on 4 of them. So where has Lineal popped up out of the woodwork from?" So those are the two issues. Those are the two questions being raised in relation to this. Tyson Fury saying that his Lineal title goes all the way back hundreds of years and that he still got it. And Anthony Joshua saying, well, as far as I'm aware, as far as he's aware, should I say, he's only aware of the alphabet titles. So what is the issue here? Well, let's talk a little bit about this Lineal title and how it all began. I think this goes all the way back to the Ring magazine. There is an article on which talks a little bit about this, and I'll read parts of that article just to give some background. The boxing magazine, The Ring, has its own Lineal championship. The original sequence was from its first publication in the 1920s until its hiatus in 1989, continuing as late as 1992 in some divisions, when it started awarding titles again in 2001. It did not calculate retrospective lineages to fill in the gap years, instead nominating new champion. CBZ commented in 2004, "The Ring has forfeited its credibility by pulling names out of its arse to name fighters as champions." In 2007, The Ring magazine was acquired by the owners of fight promoter Golden Boy Promotions, which has publicized the Ring World Championship when this is at stake in fights it promotes. The Ring allows fights between a number 1 or number 2 contender and a number 3 and number 4 or number 5 contender to fill a vacant title. This has prompted further doubts about its credibility. Sports Illustrated used the Ring lineages for galleries of lineal heavyweight and middleweight champions. So what does this all mean? Well, as I see it, it would appear that the first idea of a Lineal champion came from the Ring magazine, effectively naming someone as a Lineal, as a champion, and that naming process seems to have continued since the 1920s all the way to 1989 when it stopped, and then it restarted somewhat in 2001. So is the Ring magazine the ultimate or definitive authority when it comes to the Lineal title? Well, we know now that that isn't the case, and that there are some other organizations out there who are effectively holding themselves out as having their own versions of what is a Lineal title. Now, why is this the case? Why are there so many organizations out there all basically claiming that they have the definitive list of who the lineal title champion is? Well, one very simple reason, because there isn't any rule about how a lineal champion is created. There isn't any written rule about this. This is something that's been created by people generally. The whole idea of a lineal champion is simply people forming a view of who they think is a popular champion, or a champion who is considered the champion by popular demand. There isn't any actual rule or written rule about how or why someone is called the champion. And that is why this is a really, really controversial thing. And I will touch upon why I think it's very controversial. Take for example Tyson Fury's title and how he thinks he is a lineal champion. If you go back to first of all, he says he's the man who beat the man who beat the man. And that claim is because he says he beat Wladimir Klitschko. Now, how did Wladimir Klitschko himself gain his lineal title if he was the man that beat the man that Tyson Fury beat? And the answer to that is this: it is very murky. There isn't any definitive answer as to how Wladimir Klitschko himself got his lineal title. And there are, as I said, various organizations out there claiming or having different outcomes or of how this title has been awarded to Wladimir Klitschko. Let's start with the CBZ, which is the Cyber Boxing Zone website. They've been running their own lineal list for some time, and what they say is this. They have on their website Wladimir Klitschko as having the lineal title, and is from his win over Ruslan Chagaev. Now, the fight between Wladimir Klitschko and Ruslan Chagaev, we know, took place in June 2009. And on the line for that fight was the IBF, the IBO and the WBO titles. But in that same period, or at that same time, in June 2009, the WBC title was held by Vitaly Klitschko, which is Vladimir's brother, and the WBA title was held by Nikolai Valuev. So one has to ask the question, on what basis was Wladimir Klitschko given the lineal title in June 2009 by CBZ? Because if you were going to go by the definition of, well, the previous lineal champion retired undefeated, or retired without being beaten in the ring, and so his title wasn't taken off him by being beaten in the ring. Of course, we all know that Lennox Lewis has lost, obviously, to Hassan Rahman, and he also lost to Oliver McCall. But that's not what we're talking about. Since he regained his titles back after defeating those two, because we know he beat them, he defeated them after losing to them. He continued to be the man who had all the belts, effectively being an undisputed champion. For me, that is a logical way of looking at who is a champion. Someone who holds all of the alphabet belts, nobody else out there can call themselves a champion as such. So that you should be logically the starting point of a lineage or lineal title holder if the chain has been broken in the past. So we know that Lennox Lewis retired and no one beat him to take that lineal crown off him, so to speak. So therefore, how is it that Wladimir Klitschko gains this lineal title fighting Ruslan Chagayev when you had two other champions out there who could legitimately claim that they were champions? How can anyone say that by beating Ruslan Chagayev that Wladimir Klitschko was the man, when there are two other men out there who were effectively champions? So there you are. That straight away lays a claim to, raises some doubt over the method in which the CBZ had gone about identifying its champion. Then we look at the other organization which was effectively determining lineal champions. And in this particular case, we look at an organization called Transnational Boxing Rankings. Now, Transnational Boxing Rankings have on their website Wladimir Klitschko becoming the lineal champion on the 8th of October 2013. Now, why is that date significant? Well, we know that on the 5th of October 2013, Wladimir Klitschko defeated Alexander Povetkin. We know that that's what happened. So, but prior to that, they did not have a lineal champion at that point on their rankings. So, if we look at the situation in 2013 and what was on the line for the fight between Wladimir Klitschko and Alexander Povetkin, we know again also that the WBC title was not on the line. That WBC title was at that stage, I believe, held by Vitaly Klitschko. We know that was the case. It was held by Vitaly because Vitaly retired in December 2013. So again, how can we say that Wladimir was the man? One very simple argument that can be put to that particular claim would be that it was actually widely thought by many commentators at the time that Vitaly Klitschko was the better fighter than Wladimir. So theoretically, if those two had got into the squared ring and fought, most people would have picked Vitaly Klitschko to beat his brother, Wladimir. But yet, why is it that Wladimir Klitschko was the one that was effectively given the crown? Yes, he held majority of the belts at the time, but it doesn't again mean that he was going to be the champion, because there was another champion out there, and until those champions fought, how could we be so sure that that I was the champion, and that was the man in the division. Again, another flawed, if I may say, a flawed approach taken in this case by the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board in determining the lineal title. Now, that being said, the other ranking body at the time who ranked for lineal titles, as we know, is Ring Magazine. Funnily enough, at that time, the Ring Magazine did not have a champion at all. Never had Wladimir Klitschko as a lineal champion at all. That's interesting, isn't it? So we have one organization saying Wladimir was a lineal champion from 2009. Another organization saying that Wladimir was a lineal champion in 2013, and another didn't have Wladimir as a lineal champion at all. So what's going on here? So what is it that the Ring Magazine actually say? Now, there is an article here on a website called ThoughtCo, and what they say is this, and I'll read it out. The lineal title is technically vacant. Ring Magazine named Tyson Luke Fury as the lineal champ after he defeated long-reigning champion Wladimir Klitschko. Fury also won the IBF and several other titles on the night he beat Klitschko, but he was stripped of his IBF title after refusing a mandatory challenge with Vasylev Laskov. So for them, from 2004 till the present time, well, up until the time that Wladimir Klitschko fought Tyson Fury, they had no one as a lineal champion. It was vacant as far as they were concerned. That's the Ring Magazine. So what's going on here? So there is a problem. There is a problem, and the problem is that there isn't any uniform way of determining what or how a lineal champion is formed once there is a vacation in a title or a retirement, or once that title is lost through death, retirement, or vacation. Well, we know you can only be lost in the ring or retirement or death. So there is an issue as to how a new lineal champion is formed, created, or crowned, however you want to put it. And there is clearly no uniform organization that does this. So how can this be given any credibility? You see, when you compare this to the alphabet titles, you have the WBA Super and the WBA Regular. I mean, it's crazy. We all agree that that's crazy, but that's where we are, and it is what it is. You have the WBC title, you have the IBF title, you have the WBO title. We all know these belts exist, right? And we all know there's just those belts. And when someone fight, we know at any given time, we know who holds that belt at any given time, and if it's vacated, we know it's vacated. But you have a scenario with this lineal title where one person says that it's occupied, another person says it's not occupied, another person says it's a mess, it's a complete mess. So how does this have any legitimacy? How can this have any legitimacy when clearly there isn't any consensus over who holds it when? This is a problem, and this is why it lacks legitimacy. in my view, what should happen is that the whole scheme be scrapped altogether, and what should happen is simple. A new lineal champion should start his lineage when he becomes undisputed champion, i.e. he holds all the alphabet belts. And that, in my view, will get rid of the inconsistencies as to when the lineages start. What's the consequence of that particular approach? Well, the simple consequence is the current heavyweight lineal title will be vacant, and it will be vacant since Lennox Lewis won it. And for me, that has to be right, because if Lennox Lewis had been beaten, then yes, the title would have passed on. He retired, and I'm afraid, in my view, that lineage goes with him, and a new lineage has to be created, has to be formed, has to be started, has to be granted. And that granting of lineal title, to avoid any confusion, avoid any doubt, it really has to be when there is an undisputed fight, and the winner of the undisputed fight becomes the new undisputed champion, is the champion. There are no other champions. There are no other champions holding any alphabet belts that can lay a claim to being a champion. And that should be when the lineage starts again. A new lineage starts, not a lineage going all the way back to General Sullivan. That, in my view, is total nonsense. If any of you disagree with my approach or my thinking, then please explain to me. And if you think that Tyson Fury is a lineal champion, then firstly, I would like you to explain to me when did Tyson Fury, in your view, gain his lineal title? Which of the governing body or of these organizations are you siding with, and why? I'd like to know. I'm really interested in knowing, because for me, it holds no legitimacy. There is no consistency. And the only logical approach is to say that the title, a new lineage starts when all alphabet belts are consolidated by one person. That person is the man, in my view. Not this half-cocked up, half-baked arrangement just to recognize someone as a lineal champion, just for the sake of it. Pointless exercise. And it's not worth it, because there is still a champion out there. And I can understand the argument on the Klitschko and the Klitschko brother situation, because Wladimir and Vitaly were never going to fight each other. They had promised their mother, or their mother had made them promise, that they would never fight each other in the ring as professionals. And that's understandable, that's acceptable. But it also should mean that that's the situation we find ourselves in, and that situation has to be accepted, that there will not be a lineal champion, because the two best heavyweights in that division, for whatever reason it may be, refuse to fight each other. We have to accept that. And the same applies now between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. If for whatever reason that fight never happens, and one or the other retires, and the belts never get consolidated, then in my view, there will be no lineal champion. And that makes sense, because you have a situation where the Deontay Wilder fans are out here screaming, shouting, saying that their champion is the real champion, and you've got the Anthony Joshua fans screaming, shouting, saying that their champion is the real champion. So how can anyone say that they are the man? They can't. Clearly not. Now, if anyone disagrees with my logic, I want to know. I'm really interested in knowing why you think that this current arrangement, or whichever current arrangement, first of all, tell me which of the ones you agree with. Do you agree with the June 2009 lineage for Wladimir Klitschko, or is it the Povetkin fight in October 2013? Do you think that's where Wladimir Klitschko became the man? Or do you think that it was during the fight between Wladimir Klitschko and Tyson Fury that those two, one of them had to be the man? Which of those? You pick one and tell me, explain your reasons why you think one of those is the reason why this lineal title has been created. And for that reason, I have to side with Anthony Joshua. I think Anthony Joshua is right when he says, well, when he was coming up as an amateur growing up, no one ever told him about this lineal title. As far as he was aware, he was told that he had to go after the WBC, IBO, IBF, WBA, and WBO, and if he got all those belts, well, in my view, the IBO obviously isn't a recognised belt at this point in time, but if he went after the other 4 titles and he got those, then he's the man. Yes, and that makes sense. He will be the man if he got all 4 titles. At the moment he's got 3. He's not the man. He's not the man. Until he gets all 4 belts, he will be the man. Deontay Wilder definitely ain't the man. He has to fight Anthony Joshua before he can make a claim for that as well. But what we can all agree on, nonetheless, in our respective opinions, is that the person leading the way at the moment is Anthony Joshua. He's not the man, but he's leading the way. In my view, he's my number 1. And that's an opinion. And everybody's entitled to their opinions, and they can set out their reasons why they take their views or give their own opinion. But for me, he's the number 1. He holds 3 of the 4 belts. And he has fought way credible opponents up until now. The way he's been stepped up, all of that adds up and makes him more of a legitimate champion. But nevertheless, Deontay Wilder is also a champion. And until those 2 fight, we ain't going to know who the man is. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment and let's chop it up. Peace out.